You're not going to want to miss this episode of the AI Show where we talk all about the latest from Azure ML Registries, enabling better collaboration and ML ops with my good friend Manoj. Make sure you tune in. Hello and welcome to this episode of the AI Show where we're talking all about the latest from Azure ML Registries, enabling better collaboration and ML ops. Manoj, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Nice to be here, Seth.
Fantastic. We now, if you don't know, Manoj and I work together all the time. But why don't you introduce yourself for people that don't know you?
Yep, I'm a product manager on the Azure Machine Learning team here at Microsoft, working on MLOps and collaboration areas. Here to talk today about this new feature that we are doing, Azure ML Registries. Super excited about that.
Fantastic. So, for those that don't know what registries are, can you help us set a little bit of context with this?
Yeah, you all know about this iterative way of developing machine learning models. But in the real world, we really think of scaling this when we look at large enterprises doing machine learning. You kind of go through different stages. Like, you kind of have a prototyping phase where one data scientist is working in their local machine with like maybe notebooks on an idea, and then you kind of really scale it and try to run it in the cloud, do experimentation tracking when you get to the training cycle. And then that's where you also kind of loop in more stakeholders from your team to review and participate in model development. And that's where you kind of standardize all your experimentation. And finally, once you have a good base model that you want to then roll out and integrate with your application, is when you get to operationalizing your model. And this really involves integration with the application stack and deploying the models, A/B testing, rollout, and managing all that stuff that happens in complex IT environments.
I mean, this is a
Uh,
really cool way. If I may, this is a really cool way of looking at it because the one before was like you prepare your data, then you make it, but nobody actually does this. It's more of an iterative process from prototyping all the way to operationalizing. Is this what you're trying to get at a little bit?
Yes, and to introduce registries, you really need to understand like what are the pain points, to make this successful, right? So that's where we like get into a little bit under the covers and like say, hey, this all looks good, but how do I really do this in my maybe Azure environment, where I have this maze of different teams and different resources, different subscriptions, different workspaces, whatnot. And then like I have to manage complexity around like, hey, I need to deploy this model to 7 regions because you need low latency access and a lot of that kind of stuff. So really, when you think of this kind of setup, inevitably you are working across teams, you are working across different Azure subscriptions and what we call as a Azure ML workspace. And that's where the complexity comes in today. You can't really move assets like maybe your models and pipelines that you maybe developed in a workspace that you were using while prototyping. There's no easy way to move it, like let's say into a production subscription that's hosting your models. And that's what we plan to solve with registries here.
I see. So if I'm understanding right, and this is now starting to make a lot more sense, you're saying that each of the phases of machine learning, when you're prototyping, training, operationalizing, those things sometimes happen in the various different subscriptions and workspaces, and there's really no way to solve the problem of having shared assets without this registries thing that you're talking about.
Exactly, and that's where like things are like lineage come into picture. Like imagine there's a production endpoint, model deployed to a production endpoint, and there's like a performance is not great or the model is behaving erratic. Then how do you kind of get back to the job that trained the model, the data that went into training the model? Where is the code that was used to train the model? So all of these questions, if you are doing them in different environments and you're like lifting, shifting, moving these assets manually, you kind of lose track and end up in a maze.
This is cool.
Yeah, so Azure ML registries, these are central catalogs for machine learning assets, and they can like facilitate sharing of machine learning assets across your entire organization. Just illustrating the concept here, we kind of want to switch over to the UI and look at this stuff in real.
Yeah, this is cool. I'd love to see this in action if you can. Can you show us an actual workspace that has well, I don't know. Like I'm trying to distinguish between a workspace and a registry. Can you share a little bit about how those things work together?
Right, right. So, when you come to Azure ML Studio, you land here. This is your global homepage. Uh, Till today you typically pick up a workspace and go work in that workspace. You have your models, you have your jobs, and all the cool stuff that you kind of work on a project related to machine learning. You have it all here. But then let's look at this is my dev workspace. It's in probably my dev subscription. But what if my IT environment requires me to not deploy this model in a different subscription with different kind of compliance and security requirements? That's where like registries comes in. Registries are these central machine learning catalogs that can hold uh, you know different kinds of these ML assets, like your models, your pipelines, and all that stuff. And then they can kind of deploy to all the different workspaces within your organization. So this is like the contours of ML registry you're looking at. And let's go and look at like what's in models here. So you have a machine learning model, and note that how we transitioned here into the models hub. So imagine like you are a data scientist, you come here to Azure ML Studio, and you just want to look at like all the shared models within your organization. You just land here, and then boom, you kind of get a view of all models that are shared in your
That's cool.
organization across various registries.
Yeah, and the thing about that I'm liking is that because you may have multiple teams in a large enterprise producing assets of various stages, for example, you can share those out to everyone else in your organization with this feature. Is this right?
Yes, exactly. So not just multi-environment MLOps, but this can also kind of light up as your central organization catalog for ML models and pipelines.
That's cool. So you might have people, for example, specializing in ML engineering that make the company pipelines that then you can put your models into, for example.
Yep.
That's cool.
So you have like these system registries where Microsoft is going to bring you a bunch of cool assets, and then like these are your organizational registries where you kind of manage them for your organization.
That's what. Can you show us what you can do with models? Because I think that's the fundamental like artifact of machine learning. Can you show us what you can do with these models from the registry?
Right. So before we go into like the model, let's look at how the model got here in the first place. And to
Oh,
do that, maybe like we'll try to train a quick model.
yeah, I think that's great. I totally jumped ahead because I'm excited about the sharing part, but I guess a good question is how did the model get here in the first place? So can we dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. And to do that, like let's go over a little bit to some machine learning code here written in Python using the Azure ML recently released Azure ML Python SDK v2, uh, and basically just walking through a couple of cells. You kind of have these clients that you kind of use to interact with either the workspace or your registry. So I'm initializing a few clients here, one for my dev workspace, one for my prod workspace, and another client for my registry. And then basically, to run a training job, I need an environment. A machine learning environment is like this Docker container that kind of has all this stuff. So in this step here, I'm defining a Docker environment, and I'm creating this Docker environment in the registry. So look at this command. It says like ML client registry environments get, that's fetching the environment that we created from the registry. If you were to just swap this command and like use ML client for your workspace, you would get environments from your workspace. So using a registry or a workspace are near identical. It's just like what clients you work with, and it's the same asset. You can like put it either in a workspace where you use it within that project or the team, or you can put it in the registry and use it across multiple projects and teams.
I see. So
Uh,
that enables a situation where you might have some assets that you're working with in a registry that's saved in your workspace, but isn't yet available in a public or a tenant level registry, and you can sort of move things in and out. Is that right?
Yes, and we are going to actually do that when we get to the models part as
Oh,
well.
okay. Jumping ahead here.
Yeah. So I got my environment and I do the same thing with a component that trains the model. So the component is now published to the registry. And before we run the training job, I just want to hop back once quickly here to our registries and like just recap what we looked at here. We looked at basically the training environment that we are going to use and the training component that you are going to run to train this model. So here is next, like basically the simple pipeline job that uses the training component to run to submit a training job. And note that like the training job, like the jobs essentially need compute and all of this stuff, and registries are only for hosting assets. And that's where like when you run this job, you are actually submitting this job to the workspace. And this is different from like the environments and components that you saw, that they were created in the registry and they used the registry client. Whereas the job that I'm going to submit to train this model, I am submitting it to the workspace, and this job pulls the environment and the component from the registry to run the job in the workspace and produce the trained model. So now that that job is run, let's head over to the studio to go look at the training job. And now you see I'm back into my Contoso ML dev workspace. This is the training job that ran. And if I open up this training job, uh, it will show me that it used an environment. And this environment came from the registry. So it's not there in this workspace. It pulled an environment from outside this workspace, ran that. And this was the component that was used to train this model. This component also came from our Contoso ML registry. And then it ran some training code and produced this ML flow model. Uh, and I'm now going to like register that model into this workspace, and let's look at how that feels like.
Hold on, go back.
MY.
That was really fast. When you hit like register model, is that new? I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, so you can like work with job outputs, and those job outputs are either like data outputs or they are like model outputs. And if they are models, you can like choose to look at them and then register them in
That's
your
cool.
workspace or in the registry. Yep.
Let's go. Yeah, that's cool.
So NYC
And
demo.
as you're typing this in, it basically recognized that it was an ML flow model and pulled all the right files.
Yes, exactly. And it kind of detected all of that stuff. It detected the model type.
That's cool.
Yeah, let's give it like version 2 maybe, and then click next and register. And now I have my model created in this workspace. So I can come here and look at this model. Now this model is currently only within this workspace, which means I can deploy it only inside my Contoso ML dev. But what if I kind of need to really deploy this into like maybe a different workspace? Like I have my workspaces here, and I have my prod workspace as well. Like this is the Contoso prod workspace. So let's look at like how can I put this model into the registry so that I can deploy it to my prod workspace. So I say share model, and I pick the name of the registry where I want to put this in, the Contoso ML registry. I can either keep the name same or like change it. That's completely optional. And I say add. And this kind of gesture now triggers a activity that puts the model into the Contoso ML registry. So let's head over there now and go to models. Uh, this operation is going to take a couple of minutes to run because it has to fetch all of that from the context of the workspace and bring it to the registry. So for our demo today, like I already had a model that was put into the registry, and this was actually done by the training notebook that we were following along
Right.
here. And if you look at the subsequent cells, it has the code to do this stuff as well. And from this place, I can actually say deploy model. And when I say deploy, again, just like a job that runs within a workspace, even the models that are deployed require compute, and they need an endpoint, and all of this is inside the workspace. So I kind of pick what workspace I want to deploy this model to, and I say proceed to the workspace for deployment. And now you saw that I'm actually in the prod workspace. So this model was trained in the dev workspace, staged into the registry, and now it is uh, inside my prod workspace ready for deployment. So the model is detected. We came in from the model, and then let's do some default settings there. We don't need an environment because ML flow. We understand what the model is. We'll figure out the environment for you. The compute stuff. Maybe I just need one count here. Uh, Traffic 100%. Next, and finally create. And this kind of this you saw that now the model is getting deployed to my prod workspace here, and this operation might as well take a minute or two. So maybe let's go switch over to again to the prod workspace and look at another endpoint that I had just deployed for this demo. So this is the endpoint that I initiated for deployment, and this is the endpoint that I had deployed just before our demo so that we could get to this quickly.
If we could
And
pause for a second here, because now I'm starting to realize, and maybe here, let me show our faces here. So now I'm starting to realize, does how does it maintain? Does it maintain the lineage of where it got the model from? Because now I'm understanding that the model was trained here, put into the registry, and now it's being put into production. Can you trace it all the way back?
absolutely, and that's a great point that you bring up. Like if you can't really trace back all the lineage, then this feature is probably incomplete, right? So yeah, and so this is the endpoint. I can like do some sample testing with this endpoint here, but more importantly, this is the deployment. And if I closely look at this deployment, it tells me what model is deployed to this endpoint. And remember, we are here in the prod workspace,
Right.
and this is the model. And I can click on this model, and I'll now go back to the model in the registry, right? Like we came back from the prod workspace into the central registry, and look at this thing here. It tells us like which job had trained this model to begin with. And I can like navigate to the training job from this model, and now I'm taken into the dev workspace because this model was actually trained in my dev workspace. And I can and at this point I can review everything here. What was the environment that was used to train the model, so what packages and all of that stuff that was used. Where did the training code come from? It came from this Git repository. This was the actual Git commit. You can actually navigate to that code in Git directly by clicking here, but we'll probably skip that for now.
That's
And
cool.
we also tell you like what is the data on which it was trained on. So I can like click on this link and go look at the training data as well. So this was the training data. I can go do some quick exploration on what data it was trained on, and I can look at all of that stuff. uh, and basically this ran as a pipeline, so I can come back and look at maybe other steps of this pipeline. If I had a data processing step and evaluation step, all of this is visible as well. So just to recap, right, like we started with a prod endpoint in the prod workspace and navigated back to the registry and then to the dev workspace and all the other things that were associated with my model training.
Yeah, that was really cool, and I'm glad you kind of dove us well, navigated around so we could see it, because you actually showed how using the registry as an intermediary allowed you to move assets between workspaces in a really seamless way without losing lineage, which I thought was awesome.
Right. And now you can probably relate to this slide here when we say that, like, inevitably you are going to have different workspaces, different subscriptions, different projects, and all of this stuff. And if you kind of leverage the power of registries, you can cut across all this complexity and have a central catalog for all your machine learning content in the organization.
I'm a huge fan, and like I was telling you before, one of my favorite features in Azure machine learning that goes to the promise of collaboration at an enterprise scale. Where can people go to find out more?
Yeah, so we have a blog post on this topic. You can start there, and then that blog post has more links, to the tutorials and stuff like that. And we have like these sample notebooks as well. So yeah, we'll probably link all of those in the video description.
Absolutely, and I'm putting them up here for y'all to see. Here's the documentation link. One more time, here's the tutorial link, which is awesome. And then here is the blog post. Well, my friend, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Great, Seth. Thanks for having me.
All right, my friends, we've been learning all about the latest from Azure ML Registries, enabling better collaboration and MLOps. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care.